Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ronline Report. Today's guest, someone I've really only become aware of in the past couple months, but what a fascinating individual. He is the owner of Team Evil GSP. He's a coach. He's one of those rare people in the industry who has all the book smarts and the practical application and knowledge, puts it together, defines himself as sort of the conduit between the academics and the athletes. Please welcome Broderick Chavez. How are you, sir?
Ron, I'm well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know you don't like to talk about yourself. I saw that in Fuad's podcast, but we got to do a little bit because I actually saw a lot of parallels between us, believe it or not. We're similar age. You're a little younger. You're a young cat. You were born in the 70s. I was born in the 60s, but barely 60s and barely 70s in both cases. You started training at a gym at age 10, which boggles my mind. I can't believe they let you into a gym and into a squat rack on your first day, a 10-year-old. My goodness.
And honestly, it the world's a different place today by a lot. But not only did they let me in, but they basically I became almost maybe a mascot of some sort. The way it worked back then was a much different, more mentoring type thing. And I was I literally got to the point where my school bus dropped me off at the gym, not at home, but at the gym. And I was over the moon to load plates and wrap knees. And like just being at the gym was like fantasy land. It was like going to Disney World every fucking day. Yeah. So, it was a different thing, a different time. And it was, definitely a unique situation. I suspect most people just would not have gotten the opportunity.
No, and it's an interesting point. You talk about how back in those days it was sort of a mentorship in all the serious gyms there weren't that many of them, for one thing.
Correct.
And if you were a young guy and you walked in there and the older lifters saw that you were earnest and you were sincere and you weren't arrogant and you weren't a jerk and you were respectful, they did go out of their way to help you and teach you how to do the right things. Whereas now, nobody talks to anybody. Everyone's on their earbuds and on their phone and ignores every other human being. And nobody helps, because now if you try to help someone, they'll jump down your throat, say, how dare you? And everyone thinks you have an ulterior motive, but different time and era. And I actually feel sorry for these kids today. You started competing a year before me. You started in 88. I was 89. So you must have been only 17 when you started.
I think I was actually
16.
Let's see. I would have turned 17 in November of 88. So I'm pretty sure I was actually just past 15.
Wow.
I think I was, yeah.
Wow. So you must have, I know you don't like to go on about your past accomplishments, but you were one of the better teenage bodybuilders in the country at a time when there were a lot of teenage bodybuilders back then.
Oh my God. It's funny, like people look at the NPC heavyweights, in the 90s. It was like so many guys. Like that was the way teen bodybuilding was in the middle and late 80s. It was Benincourt and a Perillo acquaintance of ours. What was his name?
Franco Santorello. Sean Ray, Eddie Robinson.
Oh my God, Eddie Robinson still gives me nightmares to this day.
I can remember going to shows. There were so many teenagers. There would be a 17 and under class where sometimes they even had to break up into weight classes for that. This is just a regional show. And then the 18 and 19-year-olds, there'd be like 30 or 40 of them. Sometimes they have to break up the weight classes that. Now, I go to most shows. If there's one teenager, it's like, oh my God, a teenage bodybuilder? Yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely. One of my first real I almost said international, but that's not accurate. National east to west coast kind of scenarios was something that, again, didn't happen anymore. But there was I think Muscle of Fitness magazine actually organized it. But it was an actual bodybuilding camp where you went, stayed at a university, and they brought in.
It was Loyola Marymount University.
100%. I was there.
Yeah. Wow.
I was there with the Tommy Platz week. And, but the interesting thing, talking about teenage bodybuilders, is Chris Aceto had just either won or placed really high in the teen universe.
Wow.
And he just bumbled in bodybuilding thing, like, oh, I'll go see what's going on there. And so literally here I am, like an aspiring teen. And then I suddenly was like face to face with one of the very best teen bodybuilders. And it was just one of those like, fuck me moments. I'm like, man, I gotta fucking get to work. And it was really cool. And then, kind of staying a little bit in contact with him over the years. It's been interesting.
Wow. You met Aceto when he was a teenager. That's crazy.
Correct.
Wow. Yeah. People don't, that was, I think it was called Weider Muscle Camp. They did it every summer.
Yeah.
And you would stay like in the dormitories of the school.
Yep. Bill Grant was the kind of the proctor, if you will. And yeah, it was great stuff.
Yeah. The organizer was a guy named David Zelon, who used to promote the Olympia. And his assistant was a guy named Robin Chang, who later became the Olympia promoter. Yeah.
100%. And Tom Dieters, who was the editor of Muscle and Fitness or Flex. Well, one of those two. He was an editor for Weider.
Yeah,
he was one of the key guys. He was like kind of the medical officer. He was a chiropractor by trade.
That's right. Yeah, Tom Dieters, DC. So you were also actually better as a power lifter, because some of the numbers you were rattling off. At 220 pounds, you were squatting over 800.
I may have misspoke. I'll be very, very pedantic. My highest legal squat at 220, I was the APF chairman in Delaware.
Yeah.
At my own meet, which is bad form, but I did it. At my own meet, I squatted 765 at 220. Wow. I took an attempt at 805 in which I completed, but it was high. It was legitimately not kosher. But I never got an official 800, but I rode 800 4 times at 220. That's
pretty damn great. And deadlift and bench were up there too, I believe.
Yeah, bench was okay. Deadlift, I got these little baby hands. I literally have just the teeniest little fucking hands.
Yeah, I'm not far behind you.
Oh no, I'm winning that race. Trust me.
Okay. Yeah. So more parallels here. So you were actually you followed the teachings of and the writings of two guys I was heavily into. The first 2 books I ever bought when I turned 18. I had got a Flex magazine in the mail, and I read that, tore off the page, put it on my wall. I said, I got to learn more about this bodybuilding stuff. I want to learn. Went to the bookstore, off-campus bookstore. I was at UCSB at the time. Picked up the Nautilus Bodybuilding book by Arthur Jones.
100%.
And right next to it was one with Boyer Coe doing some curls on the cover, called the Nautilus Advanced Bodybuilding book by Dr. Ellington Darden. So I picked both of those up.
Which is on my bookshelf, not 10 feet from me right now.
So I was obviously within a day or two, I was convinced free weights were these obsolete, archaic caveman things that I shouldn't even bother with. There was a Nautilus room at the school that I paid to join, even though we had a free weight gym that was perfectly free and actually was better looking back. But man, it's cool because Jones, especially, he was a salesman too. He was I believe a lot of what he wrote was geared toward selling Nautilus machines,
of course,
in a roundabout way, that was his company. But he had some incredible ideas about intensity and recovery that they influenced people down the line. Like, you said the Casey Viator, Mike Mentzer, later on Dorian Yates.
Eddie Robinson, by the way, it was pretty heavily. He actually worked for Nautilus at one point.
That's right.
Yes. Oh yeah. Interestingly, Jones, I got very, very, I don't think I ever get fanboyish, but I got very heavily interested in Jones as a human, as a person.
Yeah.
And I dare say he might be the reason at its root that I pursued biology as an educational path.
Wow.
Something you don't know about Jones, or at least most people don't know about Jones, is he started his march toward millions because he was the equivalent of a billionaire back then. Right. It was worth like 300 million, which in the 70s was a stupefying figure.
Yeah.
He actually started his move through the world as an animal handler.
Yes.
He worked with poisonous snakes and reptiles, and then moved on to larger animals. That got him involved in aircraft so he could fly places. He wound up handling, then he produced a television show.
Wild Cargo.
Called Wild Cargo, which was much like the Marlon Perkins Mutual of Omaha show, but better and more Jonesy. He was like Indiana Jones with cameras and animals, and but Jones made these really interesting animal observations that turned out to be both accurate and just made me think there's more to this biology stuff than just cells. Jones, for instance, would notice that the head of a crocodile was exactly twice the size of the torso, and that the tail was exactly 1.5 times the torso. And so by looking at the head out of the water, he could tell you exactly how long that alligator was.
Wow.
And these were things like, once I started to hear that, I started to realize, like, apparently biology has rules. I like rules. This might be for me.
Yeah.
And that sort of thinking then Jones took into exercise. He started to make, comparisons to, cross-sectional area, to angle of pull, to, force production. And I liked that sort of thinking. And I liked that you could predicate your thoughts on something you believe to be accurate.
Yeah. Now was he actually a trained engineer as well?
He actually was like a ninth grade dropout. He actually was not trained in anything, but he was very, very engineering savvy. Clearly, he couldn't get through a sentence without, breaking into moment arms and, force production, strength curves and things. He was very engineering minded.
Yeah. And it's funny because you're a friend of his son, Gary Jones, correct?
Correct.
So I don't know if everybody knows this, but Arthur Jones was the father of the Nautilus company, the Nautilus machines, and Gary's son, that's Hammer Strength. He started Hammer Strength, didn't he? Wow.
Yeah,
absolutely. He's an engineer. Gary had an engineering degree.
Gary is an engineer with also a background in computers. He was one of the very first guys using, I'm going to misquote it because I'm not.
Was it CADX?
Something like CAD. I think it was not, but it was similar. But he was the first guy that computer mapping human kinetics to exercise.
Yeah. And you had a favorite Arthur Jones quote. It was bodybuilding is a wonderful, I'm obviously paraphrasing. Bodybuilding is the greatest thing in the world. The problem is it's infested with bodybuilders.
Yep.
You want to hear my favorite Arthur Jones quote?
Absolutely.
It's talking about genetic freaks and why they're not always the best or most reliable source of information for everyone else. He said, if you want to find out how a racehorse runs as fast as it does, you don't ask the horse. The horse doesn't know. It's just a horse. So.
Jones. That's the beauty of Jones. He was a fountain of quotes. You can either run fast or you can run long, but you can't run fast for long.
Yeah,
that's right. Probably the most useful quote I ever remember being attributed to Jones. Never actually heard it in person, but it sounds like him. I'm sure it was, and that is, you should look for ways to make exercise more difficult, not easier.
Yeah.
Take off the belt, take off the wrist straps, longer range of motion, slower range of motion, make it harder. Before you add weight, add effort.
He actually also said, if you've never puked from a set of barbell curls, you've never really trained hard. I said, come on. I've done some hard sets of barbell curls. I've never wanted to throw up, but I guess they weren't that hard. I'll leave you with to end this discussion. I only had one interaction with Ellington Darden in my life. So I was brainwashed indoctrinated into the Nautilus philosophy from those books, and I wouldn't train anywhere except Nautilus gyms and Nautilus centers. And I was so gung ho about bodybuilding. So I sent him some pictures in my backyard flexing. I think I was 18, almost about turned 19. There was an address for wherever in Florida they were, Land O'Lakes or something, or anyway,
DeLand,
Florida. So I sent it off and left my phone number there. I never expected him to get back to me. I want him to rate my potential. And one day the phone rings and it's this Southern drawl. It's Dr. Ellington Darden. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So Dr. Darden, what do you think? He's like, you'll never be a pro. You don't have the muscle bellies are all wrong and this and that. And he says, besides, you got to go out to California and have sex with the magazine owners. And I'm like, all right, never mind then. But he set me off, and he was right. He was 100% accurate in everything he told me in retrospect. But I decided
delivery was a bit off, but yeah.
I said, screw this guy. I'm going to show him. So, you were fascinated with all this stuff, the training and the bodybuilding, powerlifting at a young age, and you intentionally went to college to study topics that would make you, a better muscle head, get bigger, get stronger. So it was biology and chemistry.
Yeah. It's funny. Again, I'm not good at talking about myself, but I guess in the case of self-deprecation, I can. I was very, I guess the only word I can use is naive to academia. I really, first of all, I had a different vision of what academia actually would be. And then secondly, I had a kind of a romantic notion that I was sort of a spy. I was this, outsider, this athlete, this musclehead, this complete non-academic that was going to put on the disguise of a student and sneak in and steal all their secrets. And I was going to make off to, California or wherever and set up shop and have all the academic secrets to anabolism. I don't joke. I actually believed that at the time.
Right.
I just thought, like, I am going to fucking mine them for everything they're worth. And then I'm going to go off and just become huge and amazing. And the reality is really all I got was frustration and kind of loggerheads. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there were really great points, and I don't regret my education, but God, did I have a different view of what it really was.
True. But it gave you a perspective. It gave you, we have bro scientists that, 99% of coaches are nothing more than bro scientists. There's no formal education. It's a lot of regurgitated things that they found online, or maybe they looked at PubMed or something, but they don't have any actual instruction in these matters,
Absolutely.
And it's probably dangerous in a lot of cases too, especially once you get into the pharmacology side, when you have people with no legitimate training in that subject prescribing mega doses of 10, 12 different drugs. But that's something we can get into later. A lot of bodybuilders have this idea that the academics and all these studies are worthless. We think in some ways, I think we are ahead of research and things like that. Like nutrition, you pointed out before, bodybuilders were doing low carbs 50 years ago. It took everyone else decades to catch up to things we were doing. But we also have the idea that these academics and the scientists, they don't know as much as us, and they have very little to offer us with their studies and their findings. Is that a bad way of looking at things from a bodybuilder perspective?
No, this is where things get weird and very hard to describe to someone that doesn't have the academic background. The problem with science is exactly the wonder and beauty of science. And that is, it is phenomenally specific. Phenomenally specific. In that, if I set up an experiment to test something, I have tested that and only that. This idea that you can then take that and make a bunch of third, fourth, and fifth tier assumptions is wrong because you didn't test that.
Right.
And so people will grab these papers and they'll, read just, it shows that, in the third world in starving children, triple the recommended dosage of vitamin D improves their health. And then they run out, well, if we all raise our vitamin D, we'll all get super healthy. Yeah. No, you only tested that on starving children in the third world. That has nothing to do with a fat American. And that's the problem, is they fail to realize the incredible specificity. And so they make inferences that are just not valid.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other side of the coin is we also, as bodybuilders, have that problem, is we are such a specific subset. We find, hey, high volume drives hypertrophy. But the problem is we're already big, athletic, muscular, enhanced, all these things. Now you apply that to your grandmother, you'll fucking kill her. So it's one of these things. People fail to realize the incredible specificity that science is.
Yeah. And it's so many supplements have been launched and sold millions of dollars worth of product based on the findings of a study, one study that was using, 6 anemic 70-year-old nuns or something, or or 20 untrained
burn patients. Right. Yeah, you just burn patients are a great one. There's always, I love Dan Duchesne to death, but he was always looking at burn patient research. I'm just like, I don't see that helping me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the strength and research was studies that people have based training modalities on, at least in the past. I'm sure things have gotten better, but they were using, they'd take 20 college kids that were untrained, say these in 10 weeks, these people only did 5 reps for their biceps, and these people did 10 reps, and these people, and out of these strange scenarios, people would come up with this way of training is better than that way of training, as if that would apply to a whole population of well-trained, big, strong people, which was, obviously
Correct.
we can look at that now and see how silly it is. I'm going to launch right into, like, I wanted to get into some subjects that you talked about with, you did an excellent podcast with Fouad Abiad a few weeks ago. And I'll cover some of the same ground, but basically there were questions I had that once I watched, I said, why didn't he ask him that? So here we go. Intra-workout nutrition. So that's something I've often had issues with in my mind is if I eat a massive breakfast, whole eggs, big globs of oatmeal and blueberries and this and that, and I go to train an hour and a half later, why would I have to worry about taking essential amino acids while I train? Why would I have to take cyclic dextrin while I train? Isn't enough of that circulating in my system to power through a workout unless I'm working out for 4 hours or something?
Well, again, there's a number of, you have to put a certain amount of qualifiers on things. Is the workout duration definitely has a relevance. Yeah. A normally, targeted, 40 or so set workout doesn't take much beyond two hours if you're not a lazy asshole.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. For instance, people run marathons, which take 2 hours nonstop, and they basically don't consume any nutrition. So is that possible? Well, fucking of course. Yeah. Here's where, again, I think the specificity in which we just talked, this is a perfect segue. Do you, me, or 85% of the people that will ultimately listen to this conversation ever need intra-workout nutrition? No. However, in that couple of rare percentage where the individual is extremely massive, therefore extremely energy intensive. Keep in mind, dump trucks do not get the good gas mileage that a little faggoty Prius gets. Okay, so if you're dealing with the dump truck of humanity, and they're doing lots of hard work, and then the real qualifier, maybe they're doing something behind the scenes with mimetic peptides. Maybe they're using insulins or growth hormones or something that's causing very specific blood sugar alterations that might need to be combated. Yes. Okay. But is that 85 or 90% of the people that will ever walk into a gym? No.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Most of us are not 300 pounds ripped and,
correct.
Good answer.
But
good
again,
answer.
if you see that guy, you might see that guy doing that, and you go, "Oh, well, that's the secret." No, not exactly.
Okay. So you do work with a lot of bodybuilders, and athletes in other sports, but let's. Most of what I'm going to be asking about is geared toward bodybuilders. Sure. Those are my people. I'm a meathead. Post-workout nutrition. What would be ideal for, say, a 200 to 220 pound? Because that's the average. Most people watching this, they aspire to be these freaks, but we're not. Sure. We're genetically average. 250, let's say a 220 pound guy, end of a workout where he did legs or back or chest and shoulder or something. What would you want that person to consume immediately after the workout?
Again, there's speciality that may crop up. There may be special conditions, but the biggest thing that me specifically, and largely because I also, like I said, my background started in a coaching realm with not with bodybuilders, more track and field athletes. Yeah. The way I would actually approach this is much more top down, which, speaking of Jones, was a very Jones way of thinking about things. Understand the absolute fundamental shit that you really can't change. And then just keep filling in the details, and eventually the outline forms a paragraph. The paragraph forms a page. The page forms a book just by filling in the details. I believe that deeply. So what I would do is I would interview the athlete. I'd say, give me your day plan. Time do you get up? Time do you go to work? What time do you go to the gym? What time? And I would put those on a day plan because they're not quitting their job. They're not, leaving their wife. This shit's going to be permanent. Yeah. So I would put that on a timeline, and then I would actually build the meals around it so that they are unobtrusive, relatively speaking, easy to accomplish, and cover all the major bullet points. So what would happen here is, as we discussed, workouts probably take 2 hours. Meal digestion, 3 hours. Coincidence? Maybe not. We eat a half an hour before the gym. We eat a half an hour after the gym. Suddenly, everything's pretty smoothly covered.
Okay.
Now, I might suggest that workout post, the meal post-workout, be perhaps a bit less, say, fibrous, a bit faster moving. That doesn't mean, a slurry of, fucking sugar and, milk powder or whatever. It might mean fish, not steak. It might mean, potato, not, broccoli. But the point is that the nutrition is preordained. The timing is preordained. And we might just modulate the selections to make them a little bit faster moving, but elsewise it's pretty systematic.
Because, we were of the belief it's a generally held belief that you need to have something liquid, something right away, right after the workout. Most of us have.
You're actually in a great position to verify this, and I strongly recommend you do. I always suggest people, run behind me and check the shit I say, because one, I can be wrong, and two, there's a certain weight to that, But you work for MD. MD had a long association, Twin Labs, and Twin Labs had a long association with Dr. Mike Colgan. I don't know if you remember that name.
I remember the name, yeah, of course.
Optimum Sports Nutrition, etc.
Yeah.
Well, he did a lot of those early studies, and they were all done on endurance athletes. They were all done in running. And in running, the post-workout window is infinitely important, but for an entirely different reason. The idea of recovery in endurance sports is the recovery of energy systems to allow you to possess enough fuel to perform another workout more proximal. It wasn't about this recovery on a muscular level. It was about repleting glycogen, both liver and muscle. And there is an insulin sensitivity component to that, where getting carbohydrates as close to the completion of the workout does expedite muscle glycogen recovery. However, bodybuilders, at least until the very, very recent past, are not training a muscle every day or every other day. It's been historically once or twice a week.
Yeah.
You can replete glycogen, for once a week with literally like one meal a day if you had to.
Goodness.
So again, it's one of those things where the specificity of science has been usurped by this desire to get benefits that really aren't yours.
Wow. So is it really, there's no point in us slugging the whey protein and cyclic dextrin and all that immediately after because we're at the point, I think most of us, we're paranoid. If 10 minutes after the workout, we haven't put that shakedown, we're like, oh no, I'm losing all my gains. My muscle's wasting away. I can feel myself shrinking. Yeah,
that's purely psychological. That's purely just paranoia. Now, I don't, first of all, I don't want every, supplement owner, to get mad and throw shit at me. And two, I don't want to insult every single athlete that does that. But this is the way I frame it to my clients. There is a deep satisfaction to the bodybuilding shaker cup, concept, as well as a deep convenience. You can carry it in your gym. It doesn't, in gym bag, it doesn't spoil. There's a lot of reasons why it's valid, but there's also exactly no magic. Okay. It's a completely, it's kind of like the Harley Davidson assholes. Did they just suddenly feel more Harley-ish if they get the boots? The boots don't affect the fucking motorcycle. You can ride the fucking thing in flip-flops. But with the boots, they're just a little, they're a little bit, chest up a little bit. Yeah. If the shaker cup does that for you and makes you feel just a little more immersed in the subject and a little more in touch with your inner bodybuilder, fucking have at it. Wow. I'm happy that you're happy. Just don't lie to me and tell me it's doing some magical physiologic thing.
But what is the actual window then? Because there have been studies. I don't know if there's any consensus on that, but you need to get nutrients in within 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or else you start going catabolic.
You say you need to. What, again, define that. What does that mean? Or you'll throw a tail, or else, or you'll be catabolic, or you'll fucking die.
Catabolic. See, that's worse.
There's the problem with catabolic. It's a very generic word that isn't incredibly well defined. For instance, fat loss is catabolic.
True.
Okay. So, oh my God, I might burn fat. Oh, fuck. Now, see, now you got to put parameters on things. Also, active biological tissue is very prized by the body. You may engage in an activity that catabolizes muscle, but your body apparently, through mTOR and all these complicated things that we really don't understand as well as we'd like to believe, somehow keeps a ledger sheet and prioritizes what we're going to replenish first. And apparently that ledger sheet begins with liver glycogen. That's the most important thing. Your body will always do that first. And that makes sense because without a liver, you die. So, okay. But apparently somebody somewhere is writing down how much quadricep tissue was catabolized and puts it at the top of the list to repair or replete when nutrition becomes available. So now this post-workout window becomes a good time to do that, but by no means the only time to do that. So could you get more repletion per unit time in that hour window? Yes. But does that mean if you skipped it, you couldn't get back to zero in 2 days or 3 days? No, it does not mean that at all.
Yeah. Well, see, another paranoid thing, it's probably a misconception you're about to tell me, I'm sure, is that we think that we have to get this shake in because it's so fast acting, because the essential amino acids will get into your bloodstream that quickly, and the hydrolysis, the whey hydrolysis will get in like that, and the cyclic dextrin, like there's this rush that if we don't get these nutrients back into our bodies immediately, we're going to jeopardize the recovery. We're not going to grow. The whole workout was for nothing. That's the way we think. I'm speaking for all bodybuilders now, bodybuilders. So
and then, but that goes in conflict with the nursery rhyme sing-song story we all know or believe we know about muscle growth. When you go to the gym, you lift weights, you burn energy, create metabolites, and you damage muscle tissue. Okay. The step before building muscle is actually dealing with the damage. I go around the world doing these seminars, and I'm usually talking to non-science minded people. So I dumb it down to what I think is the lowest common denominator, which I think at times maybe I'm being a bit insulting to the overall IQ of the crowd. But what I would say is think about it this way. It's much like a kitchen remodel. You walk into the kitchen and you decide, wow, this is shit. This is all out of date. This is crap. So you take a sledgehammer and you start bashing up the cabinets because this has got to get out of here. We got to make way for the new.
Yeah.
You're reducing your muscle mass, your kitchen mass. Okay. You're reducing it in order to make way for the renovation, which will result in more. Yeah. So the first steps after exercise are catabolic. Whether you want to believe it or not, you're done lifting weights. The first thing your body has to do is send in basically the immune system, liposomes and all these different things, CPK, all that stuff that you look for in blood work. Yeah. That's all the markers of catabolism. Your body's going to knock down the cabinets with a sledgehammer, make a smooth surface to then hang new cabinets on. So the first steps after a workout are catabolic. Now, here's the really cool part. Unlike a kitchen remodel, it really would be more like if you use the analogy of a kitchen in a Lego house. Okay? No, really. Because you can conceptualize Legos are individual pieces. And they're fairly quantized. You would have to work really hard to break them. Yeah. Okay, you can break up the piece into pieces, but that piece is always that piece.
Right.
That's very much how amino acids work. So you go in and do this catabolism. You're basically breaking the Lego cabinets into individual Legos. They're still Legos. So just because you catabolize pectoral muscle doesn't mean that protein just gets transported off into the void. It's now back to its fundamental amino acid state. It circulates in the blood. Maybe it finds a home in the quads before the workout you did yesterday. So you're kind of shifting a fraction of a gram of muscle mass from here to there, but you didn't lose it. You didn't waste it. So this is much more complicated and interconnected than people are willing to acknowledge. But
Indeed.
the key thing you need to remember is the order of events. The first order of event is damage. The second order of event is clearing the damage. And then the third order of event is to begin to replace the damage done. So this idea that I need nutrients right after my workout, your body's swimming in nutrients, is getting rid of them. Now,
So,
if you were an endurance athlete and your goal was not the accumulation of lean mass, but the accumulation of energy stores to be able to swim or row or run later that day, yes, the immediate repletion of energy is incredibly important.
wow. So we've been taking concepts that were meant to apply to endurance athletes for decades now and
Correct.
applying them to ourselves as bodybuilders. Ain't that a bitch?
Absolutely.
Anyway, so would there be any difference? I like the analogy of this person, that person, same workout. One guy has a shake with the whey protein, the essential aminos, the cyclodextrin, maybe he's throwing creatine and glutamine in there. The other guy just goes home and his workout was done an hour ago and he sits down, has a big bowl of chicken breast and rice. Will they get the same results over the long term if they do this every day?
The key word you used is the correct word, and that is over the long term. The answer on a moment-to-moment basis is probably not going to be the same, but the overall average yearly accrual of tissue going to be shockingly similar.
Wow. Because, this is a terrible example because he was probably the most genetically gifted human ever. But Ronnie Coleman, he never had shakes. He went straight to a restaurant. I always thought, at first I was like, he's doing it all wrong. But then I'm looking at him like, I guess not. I mean, whatever he's doing.
Maybe not. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
And again, speaking of Chris Aceto, in Ronnie's case, it was Chad Nichols. But we're not talking about dumb people. We're talking about really smart people with gobs and gobs of experience. Chances are they were onto something.
Yeah, I mean, if Chad wanted Ronnie to have a shake, Ronnie would have had a shake.
100%. And Ronnie was 100% compliant. He would have had to fucking shake. Right. Probably would have had 3, to be honest. Probably would have snuck 2 because he was just that kind of guy. Now the difference is that really, and I use his name often enough, and I hope he doesn't ever become offended because I sincerely don't mean that, but in a sense, kind of my polar opposite in way of doing things would be a guy like Milos Saichev. Oh. And I know him and I like him. Great guy. And I have said more times than not, the dude gets incredible results.
Right.
But he is a micromanager. He is all about the pre, intra, post workout, this much, everything. He micromanages and spends all of this energy and gets great results. But also, and I don't think he would push back on this, the minute someone leaves that paradigm, they revert back. They don't, it just doesn't seem to be as permanent. And I'm not criticizing, I, on the other hand, my mantra literally is longer, lower, slower. I would rather take twice as long to do it and know it's twice as permanent.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because he became famous for, back when he had his gym in Fullerton, California, guys would come from all over the world and they would stay there. There was a hotel, a Residence Inn, I think literally across the street.
Yep.
And he would say, you're drinking this, workout, drink this during your workout, drink this after workout. And there was insulin being given at certain times too, but it was very, very much something, I don't think it would be sustainable in the long term unless you had somebody coaching you that was going to make sure you took your insulin, drank this, ate this. It's a lot of work. As you say, bodybuilding, it's at that level, they don't have time to do anything else. The whole day revolves around training, correct, supplements, drugs, everything has to be taken a million times a day. It would be incredibly disruptive for any other normal lifestyle.
And that sort of, behavior on a transient level can drive phenomenal results. But again, like that comparison of, the post-workout shake versus the more protracted post-workout meal. If you add up the peaks and troughs and all the things and add that up over a 12 or 18 or 24 month period, the results are pretty fucking similar. Just the highs are higher, the lows are lower. And I have no problem with that. It's just not my style. Yeah. And to be fair, many clients get frustrated with me because I'm not exciting. There aren't any highs and there aren't any lows. It's just a very linear march, and it's not for everyone. And I'm super okay with that.
Yeah. Next thing about nutrition I want to get into is protein, because first of all, I think we've been getting this wrong for a long time. Just the kilos and the pounds thing. It's when we talk about grams of protein, is it per kilo of body weight or per pound of body weight?
I mean, I guess anyone could define it anyway, but in science, all science is done in metric. That's the way science is done. The US RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Yeah.
So you would put a person on a scale, they weigh, whatever, 100 kilos. That's a robust, normal person, but okay, it makes math easy. Their minimum requirement for health would be 80 grams of protein. And quite honestly, that's valid for Gen Pop, normal people. It's valid.
Yeah.
My recommendations, lie between 2 and 3 grams per kilogram. So that same 100 kilogram athlete would get, let's call it 2.5 grams or 250 grams.
Okay. So that's for us Americans who, we never did get over to that metric system, despite the best efforts of Jimmy Carter. So a 220-pound bodybuilder.
That's about a gram per pound. That's about a gram per pound, which is, again, going back to the bro science. I mean, that goes back to, I don't know, Vince Gironda, maybe?
Yeah.
Like the gram per pound. I mean, certainly, oh shit, I don't know who that goes back to the dawn of bodybuilding, essentially.
So, but very few bodybuilders eat that low amount of protein. Most bodybuilders, we eat 1.5 grams to 2 grams per pound of body weight a day. It's not even lean body weight, it's total body weight. So I know plenty of 200-pound bodybuilders that are putting away 400 or 500 grams of protein a day.
Fair enough.
There's a lot of shakes in there too, I'm sure. That'd be a lot of meat to try to get down. Is that overkill?
Yes. Now, in the same breath, let me say this very, very carefully, though. Let me say this. It's overkill, but in the same breath, it's not necessarily wrong. I don't believe there's even the slightest bit of detriment to eating that much protein. I don't think it's harmful or problematic, but I think the benefit of protein stops somewhere around that 2.5 grams per kilogram. And I would also make this argument, which kind of put me on the shit list of, the Palombos and some of those type people, is I would make this argument. Okay. And it's a very childlike argument, but I think it fits the demographic.
Okay. We
can all very roughly agree insulin has some benefit to athletes. Athletes are using insulin. We can fall back on that. They're doing it. So they're clearly of some belief that it's doing something for them without even knowing any clever sciencey shit. They're doing that, and they've been consistently doing that, so they must feel it's beneficial. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you were to make a unit, I don't care, 100 calories or 100 grams or whatever of protein, there's a very nominal, bordering on non-existent release of insulin. However, that same amount of carbohydrate, there is a release of insulin. So if we can fall back on the logical underpinning, insulin is somehow good for bodybuilding, and this kind of food generates insulin, I probably want this kind of food. I mean, again, it's 5-year-old thinking, but it's reasonably contiguous. Sure. So I would say, just right out of the gate, if the positive benefits of protein stop at whatever, and even if you don't like my number, arrive at a number, you say, all right, there's really no extra benefit beyond that, but there would be benefit in the insulin from carbohydrates. I'll take whatever the overflow is, move it over to my carbohydrate column, and now with the same total calorie intake, somehow I'm getting more of this magically beneficial shit that I don't now have to buy and break the law to get. Holy fuck, I'm a winner.
Yeah. I think we got away from eating a lot of carbs because I don't want to blame social media. It started before then, but a lot of people got in their heads that carbs are bad. Carbs are going to make me fat. I'll eat a ton of protein. I'll have just enough carbs to get me through. And then I can stay nice and lean, have my chiseled jaw and this and that, my 6-pack. And then, then they'll take insulin and a Pop-Tart to make up the difference.
Now, don't pick on Tommy. Tommy was a smart guy.
Wouldn't do that.
But,
Wouldn't do that.
He definitely dialed in the chocolate Pop-Tart thing to an art form.
Yes. Oh, Tom Platz. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, I didn't go. You already. I skipped past that. That you were very close with Hatfield and Platz and Dieters. That's insane. What a group to be around. No wonder you had a complex. My God. But no, he liked Frosted Flakes too, didn't he, Tom? Before spaghetti.
Probably somewhere what time I spent around him, it was very chocolate Pop-Tarts.
Chocolate Pop-Tarts. Well, they are good.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Okay. So
chocolate Pop-Tarts and black coffee and off to the gym.
So would you say that a lot of bodybuilders probably overeat protein and undereat carbohydrates? Would that be fair?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I would say that. And now, again, I'll also make some, qualifiers on that is not everyone has the same insulin sensitivity. So some people maybe don't have that ability to just, consume gobs and gobs of carbs, although you do find notoriously and perhaps not coincidentally, that the higher the tier of genetics, the higher the tier of carbohydrate consumption it goes with that. It's almost like insulin sensitivity seems to set the bar for success. Yeah. Something that Dan Duchesne did outline back in the dawn of time. So I would definitely say that's a factor. And then another thing is, you said social media. I actually think it's marketing. Carbohydrates are a hard thing to sell. Cake and pie and rice, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Protein, on the other hand, a little bit more challenging a commodity to make portable and accessible and delicious. And so I think the commercial protein powders really drove the marketing for protein's really important, and it kind of created its own monster. And then I also think, like the Boots and the Harley Davidson, it kind of got into the mythos, which compounded it. I'm not a sociologist by any stretch, but there's really deep underpinnings between a thing and the outfit, the costume that you need to wear to be part of that thing. Just the simple, football jersey somehow makes people feel closer to that team. Because you gave them $50 for a shirt, but somehow you're more connected to that team.
Yeah.
That creeps into everything we do. And you or me or no one's immune to it. I'm not speaking down. I'm just pointing out that this shit snowballs.
Yeah. Now, this is totally off topic, but you keep talking about Harley Davidsons. I'm looking at you, Broderick. You look like you would own a Harley Davidson, do you?
No, not at all. I am absolutely for a number of reasons, I am absolutely vehemently against.
Okay. Fair enough.
I went to University of Arizona, and I won't go into details because they're very seedy and disturbing, but I spent a lot of time working in biker meth bars.
Oh, wow.
And that'll turn you off to the topic real fucking quick.
Okay. Biker meth bars, my God. I'd say I'd like to visit one, but I probably would not like to visit one.
No, you might as well just skip over that. Just assume it's horrible and move right on.
Yeah, this is something. It's tied into the topic, but it's coaching, gurus, and this and that. People seem to associate appearance and accomplishments with knowledge and expertise and the ability to be a good coach, and they look to people who have won contests or big titles as the ultimate authorities, when you and I both know some of these people, it's like the horse in the Arthur Jones thing. They don't really know anything except what worked for them. And a lot of them mistakenly believe that's going to work for everyone else. Because I've had a good insight into this, because at one time MD used to have 20 or so athlete columns a month, Q&A columns, and I wrote them all. So I think a couple of the guys wrote their own, I'll give them credit, but I wrote a lot of them. So I talked to a lot of these guys over the course of years, because we had a revolving cast of characters. And there were some of them that I would give questions to.
I don't want to talk over you on your own show, but just okay. to do my part, when you say you wrote them all, I think someone might interpret that as you just blatantly impersonated them. You interviewed them and then created coherent, literate interpretation of what they said.
Yes, they did have to
Okay.
talk to me every month for anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on average to get their paycheck.
Right.
So it's a rough life. But sometimes I would give them these questions and they were just, it would perplex them. I'd come up, some of them were actual questions, some of that I would just make up. And they didn't understand why somebody would train and not grow. It didn't make any sense to them. Somebody'd say, well, my arms aren't growing. And they'd say, well, train them. No, I said, no, the guys train, he trains them. They're just not growing. Goes, what do you mean they train them and they don't grow? I said, yeah, that happens to real people. That everyone's not, it just it didn't compute because at that, they'd never known anything different. You know, there are some very, very intelligent bodybuilders. Don't get me wrong. Believe me, there's plenty of them. It's a spectrum. You have some that are extremely intelligent. A lot of them are just average intelligence. Some of them are below average intelligence, but they all have spectacular genetics.
Yeah. Which is the far more valuable commodity in this particular endeavor.
We've all known people, whether it is you can go back to everyone, think about your junior, middle school, your high school years, college, where you all knew somebody who was not a bright bulb at all. They were probably borderline learning disabled or something, but they were incredibly muscular. And some of them didn't even train, but if they ever did train, it didn't matter what they did. They could do the same body part every day. They could eat, one meal a day. It didn't matter what they did. They still looked way better than you did. And you were doing everything right. It didn't make any sense to you, but that's just the luck of the draw with genetics. But does it, as a coach yourself, does it annoy you? Does it disturb you to see people attribute, intelligence and the ability to be a great coach with the appearance like that?
No. It really doesn't. And I'm going to say something that's probably pretty horrible and borderline disrespectful, but it keeps the idiots off my lawn. I don't want to deal with those people anyway. I don't want them in my life. I don't want their paltry bit of money. So I'm tickled shitless that they flock to and name your person. Because I'm busy dealing with people going to the Olympics and going to the Arnold Classic. And, I have people that actually know my resume and prize my resume and pay me for it. I don't want those people. So I guess on some deep intellectual assessment of humanity, yeah, it's disappointing. But on a day-to-day level, the fact that they're not, shitting in my lawn, wonderful.
Can you name a couple pro bodybuilders you worked with, or you have like an anonymity thing where you don't non-disclosure?
I don't have an official anonymity clause, but in general, my fame / infamy is pharmacology. So I try not to associate my name with others unless they have. Okay. People that openly talk about their associations with me just so happen to be people in places that it doesn't matter. You're Scribbins from the UK is completely comfortable, talking about me helping him. Andrew Hudson, IFBB pro, formerly of South Africa. Now he's actually based in the US. So, Dr. Mike Israetel is very open about the fact that I help him with pharmacology. Okay. So there are people that will, confess it without my pressuring, in which case I'm fine at parroting it, but I won't throw X, Y, or Z under the bus. Sure. And in the world of bodybuilding, it just so happens probably half to above half of the athletes that I've, turned pro, worked with as pros, et cetera, happen to be women. And then it's an even more sensitive topic. Ooh. So I let it lie.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll get into the gear. That's the last thing I want to talk about because that's, I can't wait to hear some of your responses. But just for training, I want one opinion because I know you came from the background with the HIT School of Philosophy way back. Arthur Jones believed the intensity level had to be as high as possible. He believed in training to failure or beyond all the time. And that was something that, Mentzer did. Dorian took that to another level too. But do you believe, especially where you work with a lot of different types of athletes, are we doing it wrong as bodybuilders by taking all our sets to failure, by training to failure and beyond so often? Are we frying our CNS?
I wouldn't use the word CNS. I wouldn't say that it's nervous system based, although there certainly is a function of nervous system fatigue. I don't know how much time you want to spend, but I could actually maybe shed a little bit of light on this topic that probably won't sway anyone's opinion, but might raise a couple of eyebrows. Arthur Jones was the progenitor of training to failure, but it was a logical argument. The difference is Arthur's decision to train to failure came from a point of ignorance. Here's how it went. The question was, no exercise generates no results. Some amount of exercise generates results. We know this. But what we don't know is exactly where is the threshold. We don't know if you made it a scale of 1 to 100. We don't know if it's 37, 42, 96. We don't know what level you have to cross to turn the switch. We don't know that. It was a point of ignorance. So the argument from Jones was, rather than going to 50%, hoping that 50% is enough when maybe it's 52, what we'll do is we'll go to 100 every time, probably less often, but what we will guarantee is whatever it is between 1 and 100, we crossed it. It was a logical argument. It was not predicated on magic of failure. It was predicated on the statistical outcome that if you do all of it, you covered whatever was needed. That is lost on people because that was a logical argument circa 1969. Guess what? The world has moved on. We're just a little bit more refined now. And we know that it's not 100%. We've kind of dialed it into now it's somewhere between 30 and 70, which is still a pretty big window, but it's a lot smaller than 0 to 100.
Yeah.
So this idea that, the reality is there's probably no necessity to ever train to failure.
Wow.
Now, that's not to say that it's wrong, like overeating protein. It's probably not wrong per se, but it's also probably not in any way necessary.
Wow.
Again, clear your mind. Not being an ass, nor am I trying to besmirch anyone, but clear your mind and think back to, I don't know, Lee Haney and his asinine Georgia draw, stimulate, don't annihilate. Dude never trained. I don't think he ever did ascend to failure in his entire life. He was the best bodybuilder of his era by an enormous margin. So I ask you, is training to failure relevant? Maybe not.
Well, see, now we get into the argument where we could say Dorian Yates trained completely differently from Lee Haney, but they were both such genetic freaks.
Correct.
If Dorian had trained the same way Lee did and Lee had trained Dorian, would they have still ended up looking the way they were going to look anyway?
Well, here's where I think the world gets really interesting. And now I always try to do this. I don't always succeed, but I always try to make a hard stop and say, this is where my opinions begin and the facts stop. Okay? This is my opinion. I believe the difference in the argument you're making now is more head or neck up and not neck down. I believe the psychology of a Lee Haney was don't destroy, slowly march forward. That it was more of a subtle, long-term, enjoyment-based, that it was different. Yeah. Whereas Yates had more of a, I'm going to war, I'm going to fuck things up. And if I don't, I'm probably failing.
Right.
It's kill or be killed. And so the psychology started to determine the methodology. And it just so happens that humans are so dynamic. And then if you have great genetics, we're even more dynamic. Anything will work within parameters, especially if you're incredibly engaged and committed and systematic, as both of those individuals were, but in entirely different ways.
That makes sense. So
that's the problem. It does.
So if we're trying to apply this to the normal population of bodybuilders, I have a theory, and it gets people angry if I say it. I say the genetic elite can pretty much do anything, and they're still going to look great. And I say the genetic flotsam and jetsam can do anything, and they're still going to look like crap. So
I can never remember with flotsam and jetsam which is the ship and which is the bodies.
I don't know. It's just a bunch of trash. It's debris.
Well, that's what flotsam and jetsam is. One is ship debris and one is human debris.
I never knew that.
I can never keep track of which is
knew
which.
where that came. I never knew where that phrase even came from.
It's an old maritime phrase.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the average person, the average bodybuilder, do you think, would some people genetically get better results from them as a result of their metabolism or whatever, training more of a volume style versus an HIT style and vice versa? Or is it just whatever you enjoy doing is probably going to be the best for you?
I think the one you're most personally invested in and most personally able to execute consistently is the one you'll be best at. The best workout for you, people ask that all the time with weight loss. Like, what's the best cardio to do?
Yeah.
The one you're going to fucking do. That's the answer. Pick the machine that offends you the least, get on it.
That's a great answer.
The answer. Now, here's where things get just a little teeny bit interesting in my world. When you leave bodybuilding and you actually get into functional athletics, training to failure now has new benefits that are not necessarily associated with muscular growth, but it's a skill. Working hard requires practice. That practice can become valid when there's some orangutan on your back trying to choke the life out of you. Being able to work very, very deep into fear and fatigue is a valuable skill. So again, when you say what's better, it comes down to really what's better for what?
True.
An army tank is the best thing for fighting in a certain kind of war, but a sniper rifle is also the best thing for fighting in a certain kind of war, but they don't fight each other very well.
Yeah. Well, see, I wish there were more. So few studies examine muscle hypertrophy in people that are already well trained.
Correct.
So all we have is anecdotal evidence and bro science, and
I'll give you before we transition. I think this will be the perfect transition to talking about drugs.
Oh, good.
For you and anyone else out there listening that has the interest, look up the Basin study. It's actually illustrated in the front of Bill Llewellyn's books. It's one of the studies he puts in the beginnings in the prologue. The Basin study, they administered about the largest doses of testosterone they could ethically.
600 milligrams.
Populations. 600 milligrams generated more muscle growth without exercise than exercise did. So now you tell me, is training to failure that relevant when exactly Dick fucking Ola generates results?
Yeah.
If no exercise can generate results, it kind of leaves failure out in the cold a little bit.
Absolutely. Oh, geez. Yeah.
Now, again, it's unique. Again, it's a specific, science is specific. It's a specific example, but it means something. It means something. It means we probably should do a lot more studies in that realm and figure this shit out is what it means. But it should raise an eyebrow.
It does. There's a whole, as a grumpy old man myself, I got very upset a few years back when I saw, I've since become more friendly with him, but Boston Lloyd sort of espoused this philosophy that drugs were more important by far than how you trained or how you ate. Taking the right drugs in the right quantities.
I believe that.
And that is, now this actually sounds like there might be some validity to that, as infuriating as it sounds, because I want it to be about hard work and dedication. You got to put your time and your effort in, and the drugs are just the icing on the cake. But maybe that's not true.
I sincerely believe that to be the case. I sincerely believe that to be the case.
Wow. So I guess, because we say it doesn't matter what drugs you're on. The guy, you could take some guy that's loaded up on all the best drugs and some other guy that's some basics. But if he trains a lot harder, he's taking every set to failure, and he's more hardcore, and he's squatting and deadlifting and bench pressing all these crazy weights, he's going to look better than the guy that took 2 or 3 times the amount of drugs. Genetics being equal. Maybe these are twins or something, but maybe not. No,
and as a matter of fact, in many cases, it's the opposite. The guys that train harder basically just wear themselves out quicker.
Wow.
They're just orthopedically destroyed training to a place on that 1 to 100 scale that wasn't necessary. It's like the tachometer in your car. The more time you spend in the red zone, probably the more wear and tear you're doing to the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a lot of, analogies that apply if you just clear your head and think. I don't want to besmirch training hard. I mean, again, I grew up around Tom Platz, and pretty much the archetypal train fucking hard. But again, he trained hard because he was demented, and not because he really knew something everyone else did. He had to get those fucking demons out, and that's the only way he could do it. That was self-flagellation. That wasn't really workouts.
Well, let's use Tom. Let's be specific with Tom. In your mind, if Tom Platz had not trained that way, let's say he trained more like Lee Haney, you never saw him take a set all the way to failure, never went to that level, went to that place, would Tom have looked the same or not?
Look the same is a funny word. Would he have achieved the same level of success had the same a comparable amount of muscle mass? Yeah. Look the same. That's a funny word. Yeah, the textures and densities and injuries, maybe not look the same. But I'll tell you an interesting little thing that maybe you don't know. Tom actually became rather friendly with Lee Haney at the end of Tom's and the beginning of Lee's careers. There was a bit of an overlap there. And the big thing Lee imparted on Tom was settle the fuck down.
Wow. And Tom listened?
To a degree. I think really probably not so much out of advice, but out of necessity. But nonetheless, he did. And again, a funny thing, and this probably doesn't have anything to do with anything, but if you look at Tom's physique at the very end of his competitive career, that 87 kind of window, that was the absolute fucking biggest by a lot. Highest body weight for sure.
Right. Now, did he tear his bicep after that? Is that why he had to leave?
No, he tore his bicep real early on. That was between the 81 and 82 Olympia.
Okay. Wow. So he did all that after. That's pretty.
Pretty yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. And this is something I want to talk about because, you told Fouad that you started your first course of gear. I hope I'm right on this. Were you 16 years old?
Correct. Just after my 16th birthday.
Okay. So, I'm the grouchy old man. I hate seeing young kids on steroids. I hate it. And this is why, and you can counter this and give me the reason why maybe Ron, you should rethink that. I think because they have that brief window of time between, let's say 14 and 20, where their natural hormone production is so incredibly high. Why would you want to take all these exogenous hormones? I believe that they're better off waiting until their own natural hormones start to wane, maybe in their very late teens. I like to see it in the early 20s. Then maybe if they want to introduce anabolics or whatever, that's fine. But am I wrong? Do you think kids that young are okay doing gear? Is it harming them?
You've asked so many questions there. I almost shuddered a response.
I don't even know what the question was.
You say, you finished with, is it okay? Is it wrong?
Yeah, forget that
it's
part.
Wrong. It's against the law. It's supposedly immoral. It's unethical. Yeah, it's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
Did I do it anyway? Yes. I've done loads of shit that's wrong. Probably will continue to do shit that's wrong.
Don't we all?
Now, I don't want to set any sort of moral or ethical benchmark for anyone else. I personally believe those should be, like religion, very personal concepts that, frankly, you keep the fuck to yourself.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on my worldview on how that works. I don't care where you pray. Just don't do it near me because I don't fucking care. I feel the same way about, your predisposition or not for penis or anything else. Like, I don't care.
Okay.
Unless it's near me, then I fucking care. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to set precedents for anyone else. However, what I can talk about is science-y shit. Human males, more so even the females, we'll momentarily focus on males. The females, a similar but different concept or conversation, same concept. Puberty is a sort of thing that doesn't have a hard stop. It's not 10 to 18 and it's done.
Yeah.
It kind of trickles off in a slow decay to stop. And when it starts and the behaviors within determine kind of how high and how long. Okay.
Yeah.
During pubescence, biologically, it's the formation of all the final iterations. Now, you, for instance, are familiar with muscle memory, okay, as a bro sciencey concept. Once you make a certain amount of muscle, it's always easier to get back to there than it was the first time.
Right.
There's actual real science reasons for that. There's something called myonuclear domain and myonuclear donation, where actual structures within a cell proliferate. It's kind of like a neighborhood. You go to any major city, go to Las Vegas, okay? There's an edge where the city stops and a desert begins, okay?
Yeah.
But when the city knows that population's reaching a certain point, it starts putting in sidewalk and street lamps to nowhere. Because it knows eventually we're going to have to start developing that land, and they're going to need fire hydrants, water supply, street lamps. So the infrastructure is put in place, and then as the city grows and shrinks, that shit's there. Muscle works exactly the same way. Nuclei, mitochondria, these sorts of things, they're permanent structures that aided the expansion when needed. Okay. Pubescence, to a degree, kind of sets the ultimate format, ground plan, blueprint for how big your city can be. If you drive that particularly hard, perhaps through exogenous pharmacology, you can set a precedent for a much bigger footprint. And then even if you recede, it's always easier to refill that format. It's essentially, in a way, not changing your genetics, because your genetics are something different, but it's kind of expanding the amount of your genetics you're using.
Gotcha.
Now, does that relieve you of the health risks and the legal risks? And that's a no, it does not. But from a simple, fundamental architectural concept, yeah, it does matter, and it does change the game.
So it almost sounds, now I think I've been completely wrong. And because I always believe that, I tell people to wait until you've exhausted your natural genetic potential, and you'll be so much better off in the long run.
Unfortunately, it's a very it's a very lovely idea to hold on to. It's a very
no, it's very noble.
Exactly, it is very noble and kind of righteous and logical and worldly. It has and fatherly. It has a lot of things that you want to be accurate, but unfortunately, that doesn't make it accurate. Probably my greatest intellectual hero was a physicist named Richard Feynman. Yeah. Don't know if you know the name, but very possibly, if not the smartest dude who ever lived, he was the best explainer of science that ever lived. He could take a fucking ridiculously complicated thing and just explain it to you. Yeah. It was fascinating. And one of his very, very famous and frustrating quotes was, no matter how elegant your mathematics, no matter how beautiful your theory, if somebody tries it and it doesn't work, you are wrong. And that just keeps cropping up and poking you in the fucking eye. There's lots of things that just like training to failure. It's very noble. You're like, yes, I've done everything I can do. But maybe you did more than you should do. So this idea of fitting your worldview doesn't necessarily make your view the correct one.
Right.
That's important. And by the way, I'm not talking down to anyone, because on a daily, I mean this sincerely, on a daily basis, I find shit that I'm just wrong about. I spend at least 2 hours of my day every day with my nose in a textbook, almost as relief from the world. I do. And almost every day I'm like, fuck me. And and I get out this notebook and this pen and I make a fucking note. I'm not talking down to anyone. I'm telling you, it's real easy to be wrong. And it's really hard to actually go, fuck, I was wrong.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
So going back to that argument though, let's take twins again. We always have to use twins. Just like Dr. Joseph Mengele, he loved the experimenting on the twins. But So you have one twin. They both start bodybuilding at the age of 16.
Yep.
One of them starts on gear right away. The other one waits until he's 21. By age 30, assuming they've both been training that whole time, do you think the one who was on gear for the first 5 years while the other one wasn't is going to be bigger than the other one?
Yes.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
I did not say their health would be equal. I didn't say a lot of things.
Right.
But if you are simply prizing muscle mass and performance, yes.
Wow.
And even more painful to say, the one who used gear earliest will probably be able to retain muscle mass at a higher level with less effort later.
Wow. See, I've been
via muscle memory.
Here I go again. I've been preaching the exact opposite. I'd say, because I see so many kids that start it, but it's probably more to do with lifestyle and them quitting because they just lost interest in it. But I see so many kids who start very young and then they sort of fall away from bodybuilding. They lose everything. And then the other people, but I attributed that to, well, they started gear too young, because it didn't make sense to me that, you know, using all these exogenous hormones when your body was already making plenty of them on your own would be a good tactic for accumulating more muscle mass.
That's kind of a wacky, again, I'm not trying to piss on you, but that's kind of a wacky argument. It's kind of like, people pissing and moaning about their natural production. You know, they want to go on a cycle, but they don't want to harm their natural production.
Right.
Why are you going on a cycle? If you really boil down the logic, you're going on a cycle because you're frustrated with your natural production. So you're trying to reserve something that you don't like. That's a stupid argument.
Yeah. And I mean,
seriously, that's like, going out to your car and going, man, this thing isn't fast enough. But I really don't want to soup it up because I like it.
Yeah.
Well, which is it? You're not happy with it, or you're happy with it?
Yeah.
If you're not happy with it, move on. Put aftermarket parts on there and make it faster. If you're happy with it, shut the fuck up and drive to the grocery store. You can't have both. This is one of those arguments. It's just that.
So with the younger guy who started gear younger, is he in a more optimal metabolic state to make use of the gear? What is that why? Or is it just because he's on gear longer than the other one?
No, not well. There was definitely that. There's what's called area under curve. It's like making money. If I start putting money in the bank at age 18 and you don't start putting money in the bank till age 30, I'm going to have more money than you.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that. But there's this concept of actual developmental blueprint, the architecture. If you and I were twins, and you and I conceive of this future city, we're going to run off and make our own society. We're going to build our own city.
Yeah. And
my conception of it is twice as big as yours. I have twice the potential. I can attract twice the population. I can make twice the money in it, and goods and services, because my vision was twice as big as yours. Yours might be lovely and beautiful and noble and legal and all these things, but when you're just talking about scale is scale.
True. Huh. Interesting. I'm gonna get away from the teenage steroid thing because we could probably go on about that all day. But here's another thing: is guys are always looking for what's the best cycle for this or that. Usually it's a bulk. They usually want a bulk. Yeah. I don't believe, and I'm very naive. I'm very uneducated in these matters, so I'm totally deferring to you on this. I don't believe there's a best cycle. I think they're all derivatives of testosterone. I tell people, and you can shit on me in a second here, but I tell people, take test as a base and you add one or two other things and you've got your bases covered. You're not going to get, I don't think you're going to get 3 times better results because you had the optimal cycle of this, that, and that drug versus a different 3 drugs. Am I right or wrong?
Well, you're more right than most people. You seriously are. Now, when I say that, I mean that's a certain arrogance from my point. I'm assuming that I'm righter. That's completely possible that I'm equally wrong. But my view of the world would work like this. It would go back to my childhood. That before 10 years old, by the way, when I first went to a commercial gym, I would be, 6 or 7 years old. And I'd be doing something really asinine, like trying to pound a nail with a rock, because that's the kind of thing I would have done. Why walk way over there and get a hammer when I could just pick this fucking brick up and my grandfather would come over in his Pennsylvania Dutch accent and yell at me, right tool for the right job, you're going to hurt yourself. And I'd ignore him and I'd smash my hand with the brick. And that would fucking stick in my head and make me angry and resentful. And this would happen every day. I would do something asinine. I would be told right tool for the right job. And I would get angry and resentful. Well, it turns out now as an adult and a professional, I say at least as many times a day as he did, right tool for the right job. It's not a matter of the right cycle. It's a matter of each one of these drugs has a nuance that maybe you need, maybe you don't. So it's not a matter of what's the right cycle to accomplish this. It's a matter of what do you as an athlete lack? What can we add to fix that? Much like, what's the best chest workout? I don't know. What's your chest look like? Is it upper chest? Is it lower chest? Do you have long arms? Do you have short arms? What the fuck's going on here? If it was just this does that, then everyone would do the same chest workout and the guy with the best drugs and genetics would win every time. Doesn't work that way. So the example I use maybe is lost on people, but everyone in the world has, I say everyone, it's probably over the top statement, wild generalization, but everyone in the world has been sick and gone to the doctor and gotten an antibiotic. Pretty simple. Everyone's had, fucking bronchitis, strep throat, a head cold, whatever. You go to the doctor, you get an antibiotic. Yeah. Okay. Every antibiotic in the universe works the same way. They do the same thing. They retard bacterial growth. That's what they do. Yeah. They retard bacterial reproduction, via that, gram stain surface thing. It's not important. The point is they all do the same thing. Yeah. Yet, if you have bronchitis, strep throat, or fucking chlamydia, the antibiotic they give you is going to be a little bit different. Why? Because after 100 years of organized medicine, we have realized that this particular variety of antibiotics works better respiratorily. This one works better urinarily. This one works better on, muscular infections, dental infections. We've figured this out. So it's a matter of right tool for the right job. That ailment, this antibiotic. Some other ailment, this other antibiotic. So when an athlete comes to you and they lack volume, they're flat, small, and stringy, you migrate to the drugs that do that. It's the nandrolones and the trenbolones, voluminous drugs. Athlete comes to you and they're bordering on fat. They're round. They're not flat. You move away from those drugs and you move over here to these DHT drugs, the primobolins and masterons and antivars. In the middle, you have very athletic capable drugs. Testosterone adds to red blood cell count, volume of work. You find your, MMA, your soccer players, your volume in terms of hours of unit time effort spent. They live in that middle column because they do that best. It's right tool for the right job. Then you might shift drugs to acquire a certain characteristic. Maybe you want a textural change or a volume change or an aggression change as you approach a powerlifting or a hammer throwing event. Elevating aggression becomes useful, so you march in a certain direction based on the desired outcome. It's not a matter of what's the correct cycle. It's a matter of what's the correct tool to generate that outcome.
Yeah. It's just, going back to the old days, the Arnold, even probably into the 80s, it was very, very basic and they grew very well. I think, sure. I don't know if it was Duchesne or somebody said, if you can't grow on test, D-ball, and DECA, then, you're never going to grow. I'm paraphrasing.
And that's completely accurate. Now, to be fair, the number of tools available was smaller. That's relevant. True. And then there's another factor here, and I bring this up all the time, and people really kind of wrinkle their nose, but I think it's relevant. We talked very early on about how the culture of bodybuilding specifically has changed a lot. It's less mentoring, it's a less developmental. There's another thing too. It's a lot more open to the public.
Mhm.
Once upon a time, by the time you got to drug use, the genetic elite were already weeded out.
Mhm.
Arnold was clearly genetically superior before drug one came into play.
Yeah.
The guys that were not didn't even get to that stage. They didn't even get to the drug gateway.
Wow.
So you had so many people think, oh, bodybuilding looks like a lovely thing to do. A year into it, they're like, fuck this. Pull out. The only guys that were left, yeah, they were all drug users, but they were, and I'm going to say the most mean-hearted thing I've ever said, they were the deserving of the drugs. They were, it seems like in your mind, you're like, it was such a much higher success rate. It's because the filtering mechanism was so much higher.
Mhm.
Do you see what I mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You didn't have,
And I'm not about to say that made it better or worse. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying it was. There was a much greater filtering mechanism in play. I mean, again, use me as an example. And one person never makes a rule, but use me as an example. I showed up at the gym 6 days a week, 2 to 3 hours at a time, from age 10 to age 16, like a fucking career, before anybody thought about letting me have the drugs.
yeah.
That's a level of proof that just doesn't exist today. Now it's a couple of Bitcoins and a couple of keystrokes and you get drugs.
Absolutely. Well, I think you made a good point when you had sort of similar discussion with Fuad. Is we had the genetic elite back then, and that was the majority of people in the sport. It was a tiny, tiny group of people. It was a cult, a subculture, where now it's so much more accessible, especially with social media. You have millions of people around the world who aren't bodybuilders. Like, I hate to say, to use that quote thing, but they're just people who want to get big and strong and impressive fast. They're looking for fast results, and a lot of them have average to below average genetic potential for muscular development, shape, structure, all that. And they're looking to drugs as a way to bridge that gap, to make up the difference for the genetics that they weren't born with. So you have people with very, very average, or in some cases poor genetics, taking tons and tons of drugs because either they believe it out of their own fantasy, or that they've been told, usually by people who have an agenda, that they want to sell them drugs, that you can look like this guy, this Nasser guy, if you want. You can look like Jay Cutler. You can look like Ronnie. You just have to take more and more and more. Take this much and that much. Whereas, back in those days, I don't think anyone in the Arnold crew was of the belief that if they took more drugs than the next guy, that they were going to beat him.
There was probably still a little bit of that mindset, although the bar was set lower.
Yeah.
But using the argument you use, like, go back and use everybody's favorite historical benchmark. Go back to Pumping Iron. You watch that movie, and admittedly, that movie's a bit farcical. It's a bit, fabricated. It's a docudrama, I think, is what Arnold classified it as.
Correct.
But nonetheless, it's the best thing we've got for that era. Use Mike Katz as the example. Like, there's a guy, he was doing everything everyone else was doing, and maybe more, but not excelling like everyone else. That's your archetypal example of genetics make it or don't make it.
Yeah.
Arnold's laying on the beach, sunning his balls. Mike Katz in a garage, fucking whacking away doing side raises, and one's winning Olympias and one's not.
Right.
What's that mean? It means something.
Yeah. I mean, the genetics always rise to the top, and it's a painful reality that most people don't want to face. And guys get so angry sometimes when you try to make them see that, because I've tried to help people from hurting themselves, because I've known people with horrible genetics for bodybuilding, but in their heart of hearts, they were convinced they could get. These are people that couldn't make top 5 at a regional show like the New England or the shows around
Gladiator,
here.
One of those.
And I'm seeing these guys hit the show year after year, and they're just looking worse. And now their hair is gone. Now they got gyno. Now they have these acne pitted scars, and now they have jaundice, and they're getting more and more toxic looking. They're getting torn muscles, and their guts are getting bigger, and they're placing worse and worse. But they're in their heads, I just need to keep taking more and more drugs. If I could get the cycle that guy's on, all my dreams will come true. Anyway, I don't know where
And
I'm going with
and
that.
it's funny because I live right in the mix of that. I mean, that literally is my everyday job. That's where I live. And I think my own personal personality defects make me, in a sense, both perfect and awful for my job, in that I don't make personal attachments very easily. The truth is, outside of my wife and children, I barely like anyone. So I can watch someone literally just destroy themselves. I will periodically do my due diligence and go, that's definitely not a good idea. Your blood work looks shit. These are the analytics. I don't think this is the best decision. But again, it is your decision. And I'm not going to stand in someone's way, and so I walk a weird line with that because I know exactly what you speak of.
Yeah. My transitions are terrible. Now I'm going right into growth hormone because, like I said, when you were with Fuad, there's a couple of things I said, hey, wait a minute. So you talked about, because the body produces growth hormone during the sleep cycle, it makes sense to try to time your own GH use around that. And you suggested taking it, if you're only going to do it once a day. So a lot of guys do it twice, but if you're only going to do it once a day, you said take it before bed. So
agree.
Okay, so here's my problem with that I hope you can fix right away. I was always told that growth hormone should be taken with as little carbs in your system as possible because the higher insulin levels from a meal, especially a meal with carbohydrates, would negate the effects, wouldn't allow the GH to work. Please forgive my ignorance, Broderick.
Yeah.
But so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, if I go to bed at 10:30 and I ate my last meal at 9:30, should I really be taking GH at 10 o'clock or 10:30, or is it going to be wasted?
Okay. Once again, we've got really, really mixed metaphors here.
Yeah.
Let's not momentarily talk about exogenous growth hormone. Let's just talk about growth hormone.
Okay.
What is it? What does it do? The reality is it kind of does something different in adolescence, a developmental stage, than it does in adults. So let's just momentarily talk about adults. You're not growing your bone length. You're not getting taller. You're not getting a lot of things that you do get in developmental stages. So in adulthood, you have a series of hormones, and then let's call them. Let's start here. I'm sorry, I wasn't immediately prepared for this. I'm stumbling, and it's not my normal take. Okay. Let's go with this. People reference insulin, which I know is not growth hormone, but they references all kinds of goofy things. Oh, it's a storage hormone. Yeah. Well, that's just retarded. Storage is not a biological precedent. It's not something biology does. Like it's maybe storing fat in your ass, but in general, storage is not a biological imperative. Okay. What insulin is a regulatory hormone. It regulates the upper limits of sugar in your blood. Your body is designed to operate within a parameter of blood sugar, and if it goes above that, insulin comes in to squash it and regulate. It's literally, you can look it up in the dictionary, it's what's fucking called a regulatory hormone. Okay. And not coincidentally, the hormones that work antagonistically to that are defined as counter-regulatory hormones, not counter-storage, counter-regulatory. There's regulatory, there's counter-regulatory. Okay, I'm coming to a point other than just pedantics of language. The point is, in nature, growth hormone lives on the counter-regulatory side of insulin. Okay. So when insulin is high, growth hormone is not. Insulin lowers blood sugar, and largely growth hormone raises it. Okay. So if you were not using exogenous growth hormone, eating carbohydrates will create an environment that largely is low growth hormone. Gotcha. So eating a large carbohydrate meal and crawling in bed will mean your post-sleep growth hormone release, natural, endogenous, will be smaller. That's accurate. That is 100% accurate. Okay. And it also means as your blood sugar gets lower and your insulin therefore gets lower, your growth hormone will go up. That is also accurate. However, once again, talking about the specificity of science, that has exactly squat-a-doodle-doo to do with buying a bottle and injecting it. Seems logical?
Yeah.
Seems reasonable? So now it just comes down to what is the environment in which this compound is going to work the best? Because we're going to apply it whether the body wants it or not. Okay, that's where we're at now. We're going to grab a bottle and inject it, force the issue. Now, depending on your theological views and science views, something on the order of the last 4 million years, humans have developed a sleep-wake cycle associated with dark. It gets dark, we get lazy, we go to sleep, we sleep in safety, get up in the daytime. Okay. Because of that, certain behaviors are in play. When you go to sleep, you're not eating, you're not exercising, you're not doing a lot of things, and the body can move its priorities to more housekeeping based. You're not spending energy on stuff. You can spend energy on housekeeping. Growth hormone release and repair of tissue happens to be one of those housekeeping things that takes place during sleep. How many times have you heard your grandmother say, "Oh my God, you went to bed and I think you got up taller"? It's actually true. You grow in your sleep. Why? Because of these behavioral changes that lead to hormonal changes, which lead to developmental changes.
Okay.
So, four-ish million years of biology has made that a really good time frame to do those things. So why not just go along for the ride? Why fight 4 million years of evolution and try and inject growth hormone at 2:27 p.m.? Why? Well, it'll work, but probably not as well, probably not as efficiently. And then again, the guy in the back of the room, well, what about my natural production? If you were happy with your natural production, you wouldn't be spending $10 an IU on a fucking drug, you numbnut.
That's true. So, getting back to that, you did answer it, but if someone's going to take it before bedtime, should they abstain from eating for a couple hours at least before that? No. Bodybuilding is a building process. Building requires energy. Energy requires food. So you can't get big and small at the same time. So was I wrong about this? I hope so. This would be very enlightening. If I had a big meal at 9, finished eating at 9:30, I go to bed at 10:30 and pin 4 IUs of growth hormone, is that still going to work as well as if maybe I waited and woke up at 4 a.m. and that food was digested, tin it then and then go back to bed? Which would you rather see a person do? Once again, we talked about this earlier, where I would lay out the day plan, workout, 3-hour window, workout in the middle, eat before, eat after. I would lay out that whole day plan. And the final meal of the day would be part of that plan. And the concept would be almost 180 degrees opposite of what you're saying. But because we're using exogenous growth hormone, okay, what we want is something that would basically never happen in nature, which is high insulin levels and high growth hormone levels, which don't happen in nature because they're antagonistic of one another. They are counter-regulatory. When one high, the other's low, and vice versa. We are going to force the issue, eat a high carbohydrate diet all day long, all week, all month, all year. That's going to drive up insulin binding proteins. So not only are we going to have the insulin from today's meals, we're also going to have a residual background insulin bound to these binding proteins. The leftover from each day basically then gets caught in, let's call it time release. Yeah. Okay. So we have a constant super physiological background of insulin, a condition called hyperinsulinemia, which largely isn't good in most cases, but we're using it for our benefit in this case. So we have high insulin, which means exactly what you said. When we go to sleep, we would get a very paltry release of growth hormone, as it should be. But no, we're going to take some. Now we have an environment where we have carbohydrates, amino acids, insulin, growth hormone,
and androgens all floating around looking for something to do. What might that be, methinks?
Get
Oh,
big.
yeah, build muscle.
Get
Wow. Fucking bingo. Score.
Wow.
Touchdown.
Do you know how many people wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, pin their GH and go back to sleep? Because we've been told you have to have as empty a stomach as possible, as little insulin in the bloodstream as possible for it to be effective.
Well, now, again, I'm going to be a pedantic dick. Effective at what?
Getting big, getting muscles.
Okay. If the goal is building muscle, the system we just outlined is the answer every time. However, and this is complicated, and I really don't like to hawk my own shit, but were you to get a membership to my website and watch some of the videos I do on growth hormone, I lead you through a reasonably detailed thumbnail of how growth hormone does what it does. And it is a very mousetrap series of event type things. It circulates, it triggers this triggers that triggers another thing. There's a series of events like dominoes falling. Okay. One of the things growth hormone does, long before any growth, by the way, is actually rather catabolic. Growth hormone stimulates the release of glucagon and lipase. Glucagon is a hormone that circulates, made to pancreas, circulates in the bloodstream, and causes the liver and possibly some muscle tissue to contribute sugar to the bloodstream. Okay. So as you exercise and burn up blood sugar, pancreas releases glucagon. Glucagon convinces your liver and muscles to reintroduce sugar to the bloodstream, so you regulate the amount of blood sugar. Okay. Yeah. So we've got a situation where blood sugar is going up from the growth hormone. We also get a stimulation of lipase. Lipase, anything that ends in ACE, is an enzyme. Lipo, fat, it's a fat enzyme. Yeah. It circulates in your bloodstream. It finds its way to your fat ass and liberates some fatty acids into the bloodstream. Which both, by the way, are catabolic events.
Right.
By definition, why might it be doing this? Because the end point of this series of events is growth. Growth is a very energy-intensive event. So if this hormone didn't have the ability to liberate energies, the event would choke off and fail. So growth hormone has a catabolic, energy-contributing concept. So if you go to sleep, liberate this energy, you're not intervening in any way, you're not doing any fasted cardio or anything strange, that energy is available for growth.
So
if you take the growth hormone and jump on the treadmill, it's going to do what it does. It's going to stimulate the lipase. It's going to stimulate the glucagon. However, you are intervening by burning up that energy on the treadmill. Growth hormone in the morning is far superior at causing fat loss because you're intervening at the fat loss step.
Gotcha.
So when you say superior, it comes down to superior for what? Superior for contest prep? Very possibly.
Yeah.
Superior for absolute anabolism? Almost certainly not.
Wow. See, wow. That you just cleared up. I guarantee you so many people are whacking themselves in the head now because a lot of people take growth hormone for muscle gain. They're trying to use it synergistically with the steroids to try to get a better result. And I'm pretty sure most of them have been doing it in a fasted state, taking it because that's what they were told to do. Last thing I want you to clear up, and this will be great because I know you love the answer to this. I've often heard, and I've even talked to some very well people who are self-proclaimed experts, believed to be experts. They say there's a threshold for growth, muscle gain, that you have to take at least, and I hear different, 6 or 8. It's usually you have to take at least 6 or 8 IUs a day before you'll see any muscle gain results from growth. Anything below that, you'll just see fat loss and skin, nails, hair, things like that. You don't see the muscle gain. Any truth to this?
No.
Wow. Okay.
Now, what is true there is human perception is a relatively blunt instrument. We're not really good at gauging moment-to-moment muscle growth. We're not. I mean, most people have a hard time measuring it week to week or even month to month.
Right.
Okay. You stop and think, how much muscle can you gain? I mean, if you're geared up out of your mind, you're doing everything perfect and you have good genetics, how fast do you really grow? Like, really? Well, what are we talking about?
A few pounds a month.
A few pounds a month. Let's go crazy and say a pound a week. Yeah. That's 500 grams a week. Divide that by 7. We're talking about, this much. We're talking about this, maybe, okay, per week.
Sure.
You break that down to per day. What are we talking about? Nothing. So what happens, I believe, is 1 IU, 2 IUs works exactly as I described, but the results are, relatively speaking, so nominal that you don't recognize the contribution.
Gotcha.
Because it's nominal. However, if you come back, again, if you run this experiment with twins and one does all of these things and the other does all of those things plus an IU of GH, in 3 years, that brother's ahead.
Yeah.
Like interest in a bank account. If we have the exact same starting investment, but I'm getting 0.5% more interest, I don't notice it in a week or a month or a year, but I notice it in retirement.
Wow.
So again, some of this, things that get chalked up to bro science are not wrong. It's really just the interpretation of why they're right is wrong.
Yeah, because I'm sure you're very well familiar with one gentleman who, and I won't say his name because nobody knows his name, but he preached that you needed 15 units or more of GH a day to see optimal muscle growth. And that's a lot of growth hormone.
Well, first of all, I despise that word optimal. I don't, that to me isn't a word. That's not a science word.
The most possible
it's
growth.
Not. Now, are there people that exploit that much and seemingly get benefits from it? Absolutely. Absolutely. Does that mean that lesser amounts would not work? No, absolutely not. It means they might not work as well as that much, but it's again, kind of like that protein thing. There's probably an upper limit to your momentary ability to utilize.
Right.
Again, something people don't realize is, it's a lot like dosages. Dosages over a career tend to go up, and people blame it on all kinds of goofy shit.
The receptors.
You're getting sensitized to it. Your receptors are clogging like they're a fucking toilet hole or something. Yeah. Receptors don't clog. That's asinine.
Oh.
But things that change would be your body weight, your total amount of muscle mass, the total amount of training you need to do to continue to make progress is probably going up. All of those things change the dynamics of how much food, carbohydrates, insulin, growth hormone that you need to support those activities. So when you say Mr. Olympia X, Y, or Z maybe took 18 IUs of growth, they're Mr. Olympia. Did they take 18 IUs when they were Mr. Fucking Texas? Nah, maybe not. Probably not. And probably rightly so. You see, it's again, science is a precise tool. People are wielding it like a fucking, like a fucking machete. It's a scalpel.
Yeah, I mean that's I don't want to get into the whole receptor thing, but do you believe receptor desensitization or receptor shutdown is a real thing, or that's just just a fantasy that we all came up with?
Yeah, it's a fantasy that not only is wrong, but it's actually exactly backward. It's exactly. I don't know if you remember the individual, Paul Borison.
Yes.
He was the kind of the Dan Duchaine of Europe. He was a UK guy. Wicked fucking smart. Actually had real hardcore academic chops. He worked in the pharmaceutical industry in birth control.
Wow.
The science of birth control. He worked in embryonics. Actually, was his fundamental background. I had a lot of conversations with the man. He's staggeringly smart and very hard to talk to, but that's not really relevant. Admittedly, birth control is kind of the polar opposite of anabolic steroids, but same basic structures, same basic behaviors, same root structure, estrogen to testosterone. in men, estrogen actually comes from testosterone. So the reality is receptors, there is a receptor dynamic associated with dosage, but it's not downregulation or clogging. It's the other way around. One of your body's defenses, your body doesn't want super physiological levels of anything. There's that regulatory, counter-regulatory concept. So as testosterone goes up, the first thing the body does is, well, we'll fucking stop making it. Let's stop that. Okay. In an attempt to bring them back into the zone. When that doesn't work, then it goes, all right, well, turn more into estrogen. At least that'll get some of it out of the way. So now you get that aromatase thing. And maybe you also get the DHT thing. So the body's trying to intervene and right the ship, but you keep pumping it in exogenously. Okay. The body has one more defense mechanism. Okay. Think of, everybody does that sing song, drug is like a key and the receptor is like a lock. And okay, momentarily change that analogy to traffic on the highway and parking spaces. Okay. You've got X amount of traffic and the body wants less. So it frees up more parking spaces in an attempt to get some of the cars off the highway. The body actually upregulates the amount of receptors as an attempt to get plasma values down. Now, the funny part is the consequence of that is actually shockingly similar in that think of the parking spaces as a percentage, okay? To kind of like the 0 to 100, somewhere in there stimulates growth. Same thing with the parking spaces. There's some number of occupancy, some percentage of occupancy that stimulates that whole mTOR, all that growth thing. Yeah. Okay. So as the body's adding parking spaces, it's actually lowering the percentage. There's less, percentage wise, there's less total spaces occupied.
Right.
So as you add parking spaces, upregulate receptors. In a way, you're down-regulating the signaling on a percentage basis. So the outcome is very similar, and people would immediately go, well, my drugs aren't working as well. That's correct, but for the wrong reason. It's not that the drugs aren't working as well. It's actually you need more drugs to make the same percentage work as well.
Gotcha. Huh. Interesting. I've never heard it explained that way, ever. So, wow. Yeah, that's one of the gifts of, I don't know if it's the definition of genius, and you're not going to, I know you won't take that label, but evil genius, maybe. It's people that can break down very, very complex subjects into easy to understand language for us common folk. And you
that's as close to stroking my ego as I'll allow, because as I said, Richard Feynman really was my intellectual hero, and that was in fact his gift. Well, he could take very, very abstract, fundamental physics and turn them into something that you could at least become vaguely familiar with, which was a magnificent gift. I
want to know, what is your website, Broderick?
I will actually answer that in a more generic sense. Everything, the one good bit of business advice I ever got, well, no, that's terribly ignorant, but the most effective piece of business advice I ever got is uniformity. Every single thing I have, my email address, my website, my Facebook, Instagram, if I'm there, it's Team Evil GSP.
Team Evil GSP.
Yep. .com, at Instagram, at Facebook, at etc.
That's admirable, because having it all uniform is incredibly helpful to people trying to find you. Team Evil GSP. Why evil?
It's actually funny. We actually spoke of that particular devil at Dave Zelon's Muscle Camp. We were having a conversation kind of behind the scenes after hours, and Tom Dieters himself actually spoke those words first. He said, if you survive all this, he said, you're going to be an evil genius. And God damn it, I ran with it.
Wow. I cannot believe it's been almost 2 hours. My God, I've taken up so much of your day. My God, I'm sorry that I didn't even notice how long it's been going on, because it seems like we just started talking. That's I could bother you all damn day, but this has been great, man. So Yeah.
Two factors involved. One, you and I have crossed paths many a times over the course of our careers, and I can't think of somebody that I more deserving of my time. And then secondly, the boss, Mr. Blackman himself, asked me to do this. Not that I wouldn't have done it otherwise, but that adds a layer of imperative to things. So I feel really good about it. No, it's been a pleasure to sit and talk with you. I don't mind a bit.
No, I appreciate it. You've taught me a few things, and I'm pretty ignorant in a lot of areas. Like I always make a point to tell people when they ask me about drugs, saying I'm not an expert. And boy, you really taught me some lessons today. So thank you so much, Broderick. This has been definitely the most informative interview. I can't think of one that I've done about, just these video ones. This is about 500 I've done so far. So
wow.
Yeah. I mean,
not talking about stroking egos. I don't think you get nearly the credit you deserve. I mean, you've written a really excellent book on this. You've been involved in this. You go to you march out the street and do all the goddamn seminars and expos and Arnold's and plus, I mean, how many people have done 500 episodes of anything? Like that's real hardcore chops. And
5,000 articles published. My God.
I am duly impressed. That is
thank you.
Something that I don't personally have the chops to do.
Well, it's been a long road, but let me tell you, like I said, I'm an old dude, but I love it. I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Yeah. If I had to pick some other industry to work in, I can't even imagine. I'd be at a loss. Oil?
Porn.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the obvious choice.
Well, I mean, that's. I was a facetious bastard even before I was an adult. I remember, I don't know. I think it might have been 4th or 5th grade. The teacher did that silly, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a midget. And she was like, what? And I was like, they have all the cool jobs, like the porn, circus, pro wrestling. Like, I want to be a midget.
You can't even say that word anymore. That's an offensive term. But
well, fair enough.
Yeah, we're both under 6 foot. I think we can get away with it. Yeah. Anyway, Broderick Chavez, thank you so much. This has been such a great interview. I appreciate your time. Wow, I don't even have any words. So thank you, everyone. Check out teamevilgsp.com. Check it out on Instagram, all that good stuff. This guy here has some knowledge to impart, and I'm going to check out your website today. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not good at this, but my handlers and helpers would be chagrined if I didn't. We have a members section, members.teamevilgsp.com. You can find it just through the regular website. $15 a month. You can hear me blather about PEDs and sports performance quite literally until you are goddamn sick of it. There's, I don't know, 3 or 4, no, more than that, probably 400 or 500 hours of material on there, myself and others. So,
yeah, you know what? They say you get what you pay for. And if you want everything for free, good luck, because you're going to get a mishmash of a lot of contradictory things and wildly inaccurate. John Meadows, another guy we both respect a lot. He's had a very successful member section for years. And I know plenty of people who love it. So
sure, I do. I absolutely. I really look to John for some of the training side of things. We have mildly different views on nutrition, but not wildly, just mildly. But definitely probably the go-to guy on just basically, getting shit done in the gym.
Absolutely. I love John. All right. I got to let you go. This has been intense. I love it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for watching this. I'll try to put some timestamps on it later so you can sort of wade through it if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, but you should. And that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been a good one. We'll see you next time.